Hey, as we get going, first, if we have not met, my name is Denville, and I get the wonderful privilege of leading a couple of things here at the chapel. But all of them require all these kinds of teams. And the one thing about leading I have found is that there's always people attached to it. That a lot of people like to lead tasks, but leading people it's like a lot more fun. So I get to do a lot of that. Before we jump into session that we have today, here is what I would love to just kind of hear from a couple of you, if you'll be willing to share. What are you taking with you from Scott's session? Um, like, what's the one thing that you're like, this is mine. I'm gonna put that in a bag, and I'm gonna take it with me, and that's why I came. Yes, go for it. Being reborn. Yeah. Like leaders are not made and they're not birthed, but they're reborn. That's good. Awesome. Awesome. Yes. Yes. Leadership begins with an encounter. That was kind of challenging because you're like, have I had an encounter? Right? Because like I'm leading. Like I don't know. Like did I have the encounter? Like I didn't have like a blinded encounter on the road to Damascus, right? But that could be a real like validating. Like did I have an encounter? Or even am I having encounters with God? Right? Because like Paul didn't just have one encounter. Like we find out later on, he had multiple encounters. He talks about how he encounters Jesus and he saw this man in the spirit, and like he seems to have encountered Jesus on multiple occasions, right? So it's this constant encounter with Jesus, right? That's good. Awesome. Yeah. Tell me about that. Why is that? Like, what's the big idea there for you? Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. If we were honest in this room, right, where you're like, here's how many steps I need to say yes, right? Like, if you need more than 10 steps, like, where are you at? 10 steps? 5 steps. Like, Lord, I need like 5 steps. It's good. No, that's honest. Like, I need like 5 steps. How many of you are like 3 steps? Give me 3 steps. Three? No, 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 no. No, that's the gap, baby. That's the gap. Any two steppers? I just need 2 steps. Two? 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 Is there any one stepper? I just need one step. One step. Okay. No, give it high, give it high. Okay. All of my one step folks, you all have paid a high price for some things. Because you've done the one step and have you taken the one step and it not work? Yeah? Okay, cool. That's good. That's good. Yeah. That's a scary. That's a really really scary part. Lord, I just need like 1 or 2 steps to trust you, and then trust you for the rest of the way. If you're a 10 stepper, that is awesome. It could be really cool to just say, all right, Lord, like help me to just trust you more and more to where I actually need less steps and I just need like more presence and more encounter. Like that's where the encounters actually happen. It is scary to encounter God. Um, like he is, like he's God, right? And to encounter him, you got to kind of step off a ledge. Okay, they don't like that. That's not fun. Okay, all right, cool. All right, give me one more. Give me one more, and then we'll jump in. One more. What are you taking with you? There's three. I'll take yours. Awesome. Yes, 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 yes. Awesome. Can I hear yours? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. One of the things that I think is really important, and I've done this in my life, and maybe you have too, where the Lord has invited you into something big, or maybe to step into something, and you actually did not take Him up on His offer, and you've actually walked away, and you've actually kept going, and it's really confusing because you could actually not take him up on his offer. Like he invites you into something really big. He gives you 3 steps and you need 6, and so you just say no. And it's confusing because when you walk, he's still really good to you. And what you would think is that if you say no, then he would stop his blessing or that he would do something. But he's like, all right, then I'll walk with you where you go because I'm more about you. But in the back of your mind, you know that you didn't take him up on that offer, right? Like, because it was really big. The really cool thing about that is there's always an opportunity to go back to your last place of disobedience and say yes to the Lord. Um, it is one of the things that I wish someone had told me early on, that like I can walk away from something because I'm too afraid and I don't have enough. And then at some point I could come back and say, Lord, can I still take you up on that offer? Because like God is not bound to time like I am. I'm bound to moments, but he is eternal and exists transcendentally through time. And so that's why prophecy works, because he talks about your future as if it was present. And so if I say no to him in something now because I'm so afraid, I can walk and be healed and trust him and say, Lord, can I say yes to this now? Can I trust you again here? And his word doesn't expire. And so if that's you, like, it's really cool. In Christianity, we call that repentance. It's just a fancy explanation for repentance, right? But repentance is actually turning back and coming back to him again. And that could be a really cool place of like, Lord, like I said no to you when I was in my 20s. And here I am in my 50s. But you're not bound by time. And so I'm sorry. Like, I want to say yes now. And just see what he does. Yeah? It's good stuff. It's good stuff. Yeah, I thought, go for it. I am well into my 40s, sir. It's a joke. I'll fill in the rest of the room. I turned 40 I turned 40 on October 14th. On October 15th, I showed up to the office with my team and said, guys, now that I'm well into my 40s, there's some stuff that we're not going to do here anymore because I am well into my 40s now and things are changing. All right, let's jump into where we are for today. Here's where I would like to begin us. In Luke chapter 22 is kind of where I would like to start off our time together. This is in Luke chapter 22, and it pairs really well with John chapter 13. We'll look at both of them together, and I will read it out of the NRSV. This is Jesus at the time of the Passover. He's having the Passover meal with his disciples. It reads this way from verse 24. A dispute also arose amongst them as to which of them was regarded as the greatest. But Jesus said to them, listen, the kings of the Gentiles, they lord it over people who they have authority over, and they're called benefactors. But it's not so with you. Rather, the greatest among you must be like the youngest, and the leader like the one who serves. This is Jesus actually telling his disciples. Jesus is redefining something for his disciples that they may have missed before. He goes on here. I want you to see this, the rest of the verse. And he says, for who is greater? The one who's at the table or the one who serves? Right? Like when you go to a restaurant, like just we could benefit from this. This is like still contemporary, right? Who is greater? Let's say you go to the most expensive restaurant. You know what side of the table you're on. Let's say you go to a restaurant where steaks are $250. You know what side of the table you're on. Are you at the table or serving the table? Right? That's a bank account question. Right? So Jesus says, who is greater? The one who is at the table about to eat a $250 steak, or the one who's serving the table of the one who's about to eat the $250 steak? Is it not the one who is at the table? Right? And Jesus said, here's the problem with that. I'm the one who's serving the table. Right? What Jesus is doing, Jesus is taking a circumstance that you are familiar with, and he is turning it on upside his head, and he's saying, it used to be this way. Here's the problem with the way that the world used to work. It used to work that the person who is at the table is the greatest because they can afford to eat at that restaurant, and that is still true. Here's the only problem, is that I am now serving the table. And so the rules have changed because God has placed himself somewhere where he does not belong. And then he goes on and he starts to explain how that now informs what we think about when we think of leadership. This is how Jesus forms leaders. We're looking at what kind of leaders does Jesus form, right? And we're going to talk about how that develops out into teams. But we're not going to talk about just the practical portion of how do I lead a team and how do I recruit a team and etc. These are the kinds of leaders that Jesus forms. Here's how Jesus forms leaders. He puts himself in a situation and he takes a seat. And the seat that he takes redefines the entire room. He says, If I sat at the table and you were serving me, then I'm going with the culture. But here's the kind of leaders I'm creating. If I'm serving a table and I'm the greatest human being that has ever lived, then who is the greatest? Now the greatest is the one who serves. The paradigm has shifted, your reality has changed, and the greatest used to be the one who's at the table. But now that Jesus serves someone who can eat a $250 steak, all of a sudden it's not so impressive. Because God has incarnated, has come into a human body so that he can serve those who are absolutely amazing to us. Which means that those who are absolutely amazing to us are not so amazing anymore. That what makes someone amazing is not that they can afford a $250 steak. What makes them amazing is that they could serve tables. Jesus has redefined leadership. And now his disciples have to swallow this pill. And they have to decide when we go to a restaurant, who are we going to regard as the greatest? Who are we going to strive to be? Because Jesus has redefined something for us, right? So when Jesus, like, if you put yourself in the place of the disciples, they have lived a certain way their entire lives, and all of a sudden comes this nearly homeless rabbi who's like teaching them how to live differently, and they believe that he's actually great, and he's calling them to be leaders, and he's redefined it for them, and I think it changes the way that we lead. So if this is true, if it is true that Jesus is the greatest human being who's ever lived, and he is the greatest servant who's ever lived, then that changes everything about you. It should change everything about you and me who are called to his leadership, which means that it looks nothing like the world, that it is countercultural. It goes counter to the very culture that Jesus lived in, and it goes counter to the very culture that we live in as well. And so therefore, we ought to lead like this. There's something different that happens when we're called to lead like Jesus. In this story, when you look at it in John chapter 13, what Jesus has done is Jesus has already made his disciples so great. This is the part where he washes their feet. Do you guys remember that? Right? Like, you're supposed to be washing Jesus' feet, like the woman who comes in and washes feet with tears and with oil, and everyone has always washed Jesus' feet, and his disciples saw that. And they were like, yeah, wash his feet because he's God and he's awesome, right? And they were okay with that. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the Gospels in John chapter 13, Jesus says, now I'm going to wash your feet. And they're like, no, 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 no. Like, the way that we've seen it for 3 years is the woman comes into the room and she cries and she washes your feet. She comes with the alabaster jar and she washes your feet. Like, so therefore, you've participated with the idea that the greatest person gets their feet washed and the one who's not so great is the one that washes feet. And Jesus says, you're right, except now I'm going to wash your feet. And so what do you want to do now? And now that I'm changing the reality that you live in, what are we going to do? Because I'm changing the definition of what you thought was great. I'm changing the definition of leadership. What Jesus has done is he has given them confidence that comes from a different place. When Jesus washes your feet, it changes the place that you lead from, changes the way that you serve from. So that's why he tells them at the end of the gospel, I have to wash your feet. Because once the greatest person in the room has washed your feet, you no longer live for other people to wash your feet. Now you can serve. Right? I put it this way. We lead from our position in Christ. And when we do so, we've already been served by the greatest entity ever. This is why Pastor Scott said leadership begins with an encounter. Because when you encounter him, what greater thing are you striving to encounter? When he has washed your feet, what other thing are you looking after, right? So we're confident in our position. And what is our position? We have sat down and the master has washed our feet. And our position comes from Jesus, so therefore we're not fighting for it. I don't need people to serve me. I'm not fighting to be great because the greatest person has already washed my feet. I'm not fighting to be significant. The most significant person has identified me. I'm not living to get some kind of status because I have a status with him. That there's something about encountering Jesus, allowing him to minister to you deeply, that changes the place where you serve from, because once you've gotten everything, what else is there to get? Leadership begins with an encounter with Jesus, a profound encounter with Jesus, and we'll do some of this at the end of our time here. But I don't mean like a spiritual, charismatic encounter. That's not exactly what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the kind of encounter where he forgives, the kind of encounter where he washes you clean, the kind of encounter that humbles you. It's not a like charismatic, I got tinglies in my body during that worship song. It's the kind of encounter where he stops you on your tracks from where you're going, and he blinds you and tells you that you were wrong, and then he forgives you and sets you on your way. That's the kind of encounter I'm talking about. I don't mean the kind of encounter where he strokes your ego and tells you that you're so good and you've always been right. I mean the kind of encounter when he tells you that you've always been wrong and he's going to make you right and make you even better and set you forth. That's the kind of encounter that changes us. And when you encounter God like that, what else could anybody ever give you of any value? This is how Jesus births leaders. The way that Jesus births leaders, he washes their feet so that they never have to stomp on anybody else's head for them to wash your feet. The way that Jesus birthed leaders, look at this one. This is really cool for the early church. He dies, and then he raises from the grave, and he says, I'm just the first, and you're next. The worst thing they could do is kill you. And if they kill you, I'm just going to bring you back to new transcendent life. So once you have that, what are you afraid of? What can you gain on this side of eternity that God won't raise up and give you better on the other side? That's the kind of confidence that he gives to people. And so the disciples were not great people. They were people who God incarnated and washed their feet. And then he forgave them. And then he told them that, hey, if they kill you, do you see this resurrected body? Yours is next. Now that you're so confident in who you are in me, just do anything I call you to do. Because the worst thing that could happen is they'll kill you. But you saw how that ended with me, right? So now lead from a different place. I learned this. I learned this personally when I was a rookie police officer. I was 19 years old, and they gave me a badge and a gun and handcuffs and power at 19. And I know it's crazy. And 19-year-old me. And 19-year-old me, I was with my field training officer, and I remember, I got into a fight. It was in the middle of the night. I got into a fight with this guy, and I fought him, and it was really, really bad. And my adrenaline was going. All the police cars came, and they backed me up, and they helped me, and I was bleeding. The ambulance came, and my adrenaline was rushing. And we finally got him into custody. We put him in the back of my car, and I'm in the passenger seat. My field training officer is driving, and I am losing it. I'm screaming because adrenaline. I'm 19, right? And I'm like, how dare you? And I'm going off. It's crazy. And we're done, and I get out, and I'm talking to this guy, and I'm not blessing him, right? I'm saying all kinds of things to him, and we get out, and we get him, and we take him, and he's in jail, and we get back in the car, and I'm finally calm down, and my FTO says to me, never do this again. And I thought he was saying, never be alone in a park after dark fighting a suspect. But what he was saying is, you're going to win every fight that you get into. He says there are 3,000 police officers in the Miami-Dade Police Department, and if you push your red button, they're all going to come. And even if a suspect kills you, he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. You're going to win every single time. So now that you know that you're going to win every fight, you could actually care for the community that you're here to serve, because you're already going to win. You already have all the power. You have the gun. You have the authority. You've already won. You have nothing to prove. And I hated it because he was right. These are the kinds of leaders that Jesus creates. He brings you to the end of the game. He gives you the greatest encounter and said, now you're ruined for every other great thing that you could ever strive for. And so now when you go back, you can just serve. That's the kind of leaders that Jesus creates, right? That's what Scott means when he says to have an encounter with God that actually changes you and humbles you and makes you different. And what that does is it frees us, it liberates us from getting accolades and getting thank yous and getting respect, right? I deserve. It ruins you for all of those things. And now you ask a different question. And the big question that leaders ask is, how can I help? That's the big question. There's a freedom. This is the best question. This is the answer to every pop quiz I will give you for the rest of our time. This is the big question that I think great leaders ask. How can I help? Every great leader, they trust you with responsibility and authority, and then they show up on the backside, and what they want to do is help. There are leaders in this organization who they will give authority and give responsibility and then show up on the back end and say, how can I help you with that? That's the kind of servant leadership, because now I don't need to call all the shots. I don't need to delegate. I just want to help. I just want to help. That is the greatest question that I think a leader can ask, right? And what happens when we do that, we start to lead from a different place, right? It changes the way that we view the people who we are leading, right? So if you're in this space, you probably have a team of people who you're leading. Hopefully, it's in a church context, whether it's on a safety team or you're leading groups or a prayer team or a host team. You're leading some team of people who are doing something. One of the greatest things that happens when Jesus shifts our view of leadership, we start to realize that no one has come to church to do tasks. What's really important for us to understand, especially here, and I mean this now locally, the chapel, it's important that we as leaders understand that no one has come to the chapel to do tasks. Every single person who's ever come to the chapel, they have come because God is drawing them. No one comes here to volunteer. No one. No one came to church to serve on your team. No one. They do, but that's not why they came. The reason why anyone came is because God was drawing them to himself, and then they got here, and then God said, I trust you with them. Right? They were having a crisis in their life, or the Spirit was doing something deep inside of their heart, and they showed up through the front doors of your campus, and they got in there, they heard the worship, they heard the message, they encountered God, all these things were great. The campus pastor got up and said, you should join a team, and they were like, yes, and then they handed them to you. And one of the things that I am really passionate about in this for us is that we never become a people who think that people just come to church to serve. Here's the danger of how this works. People on our teams, eventually they could show up and just start serving and forget why they came in the first place. Our responsibility is to never let that happen. Right? No one came to do tasks. They came because the Spirit of God is drawing them. And the question is, after serving with you, is that still true? Is that still true? On our campus, we've created some boundaries around serving, and that we're looking at people who come to church and have to serve every Sunday. Like, if you're serving every Sunday, like, I need to pull you aside and just make sure, because I don't want you to be confused to think that God brought you here to serve. Like, do not be confused. He's drawing you to himself. I've had to fight with people who said, I have to serve every Sunday. And we have had fights like, you will not serve every Sunday. They have found their identity in serving instead of in their Christ, and we have allowed that to happen. No one came to volunteer. The Spirit is drawing them to the church, and then God has entrusted them to our care. One of the things I've learned about leaders is that leaders don't have followers. They have people entrusted to their care. That God has entrusted people to your care. Right? And so again, this posture, because a lot of times what happens is we get obsessed with things going right and things going well, and so now we just want more people and more volunteers. The big question that shifts when we realize Jesus has brought us to the end of our journey. We've already had success with him. We've already had the greatest accolades that we could ever have, and so now when he puts me in a position of leadership, I'm not using people so that I could do well. Right? These are people entrusted to my care. And so for our teams, for instance, like one of the big questions that I think is a shift that happens in this is we go from how do we get more volunteers? And the big question becomes, how do we shepherd the people that God has entrusted to us? If you have a team of people, my guess is that every team needs more volunteers. I've been in church for a while. I've never had a team that's like, nah, we're good. There's always more. Why? Because God's always drawing more people to himself, right? And so you're always going to have a need. You're always going to need more volunteers. Get over it, right? The question is, how are you shepherding and caring for the people who God has already entrusted to you? Why should he trust you with more volunteers? How are you doing with the ones you have, right? People came to church because the Spirit is drawing them, and their experience must be consistent with what we're doing still. Right? And so that's the kind of leader that Jesus forms on the other side of these kinds of experiences, right? It changes the way that we lead. When you have encountered the living God and you encounter him on a regular basis, you're not trying to get more people, get more teams. You're not trying to get more. You are trying to give more. This is what happens when you encounter. Like, if I gave you all the monies, just all of it, just the monies, just put it all in your bank account. You're not going to try to get any more money because you already have all the monies. So hopefully your heart would shift and be like, well, what am I going to do with these monies? Who am I going to help? What do I do with it now? Because we have been trained to only get it and go for it, work for it. But okay, now you finally got it. And what happens when you have an extraordinary encounter with Jesus on a regular basis, it changes you to become an extraordinary, generous person because you've already gotten the greatest gift that there is to ever get. Living in a constant reminder in that is we start to become extremely generous leaders, right? We lead with generosity. We lead with generosity. Generosity has been a term that's reserved for money, which I think is unfortunate. We become generous leaders because generosity, it creates generous teams. It creates a team of people who are showing up so that they can give. So that they can give of themselves, right? I want to give you a couple things that I think is really important for us to be generous with, okay? The first one is we're generous with trust. We empower people to do things. If you're leading your team and you are doing all of the things, can I just invite you to think through ways that you can actually trust your team? Who are some people who you can entrust with something, not to take on more responsibility because you're tired and you need some help, right? You actually want to be generous with trust, that there's something that you want to accomplish, and it's really, really important, but I'm going to trust someone, and I'm going to give them the opportunity to make some decisions. I'm going to trust the people on my team. And you're thinking, well, what if things go wrong? Like, you're not winning if things go right because you've already won. So you could take a risk on people. Every single person in this room, here's something I know to be true about you. Somebody took a risk with you. You're risky, right? You were a risk. You were a risk, and somebody was like, give it a shot. Right? And they trusted you with something, right? And we want to be generous with our time. Generosity with our time means to invest in conversations that matter more than just conversations on task, right? We don't just want to have pre-service check-in conversations and how are you doing and fair weather conversations. We want to be generous with our time. We want to ask people how they're really doing, and we want to make sure that we're following up. Why? God has entrusted people to your care, and this is how you care for them. Right? We pray with people and not just for them. That there's an opportunity for us to realize that God has brought you to the end of your journey and he's making you extremely generous. So people are not here to make our teams work. People are here because God is calling them. I say this on my campus. I don't know if it's true, but I've been saying it for a couple of years. When we get a new team of volunteers, every once in a while we'll gather and I'll give them a little pep talk. And it's probably not a good pep talk, but here's how it sounds. We actually don't need you. This is normally how I start this. Don't tell Scott I do this. And I say, hey, we can automate a lot of this stuff. Like the guy in the back that pushes the button for the slides. You know you can automate that. Like tracks, like you could turn on Spotify and play backtracks for music. Like the guitar players, the drummers, like we know how to do that. Like, we could have a recording that says, welcome to the chapel. On your right is all your restroom. We don't need you holding doors. We have door stoppers, right? We can do all of this. So why do we have this? The reason why we have it is because it is an excuse to build a relationship with you and to disciple you and to care for you and to walk with you. Because this is just a reason for us to have it. The early church existed without kids' church. Yeah, okay. All right. But then as we build, these are just spaces for people to come into because your team is an opportunity for people who said yes to Jesus, and being with you is how they continue to experience that yes to Jesus. So we can't sideline that for service and task and duties because that's not why they came. And it cannot be the reason why they say. So we're generous with our care. Oh, we're generous with our influence. This is one of my favorite ones. If you have a lot of influence within your sphere, it becomes really, really important that you utilize your influence for the benefit of others. Right? One of the best questions I think leaders ask is, how can I use the resources of my world for your benefit? How can I use my influence for your benefit? I'm not going to benefit from it anymore. I've already been the beneficiary of a greater kingdom. I've been given a platform. I've been given an opportunity. I have somebody's ear. Like, how can I use my connections, my resources, my influence, my power? How can I use this for your benefit? If you've been a part of the chapel for like 15, 20 years, you probably have some organizational influence, and you probably know some people. Right? And so when new people come onto your team, it's like, okay, how can I use my connections and my resources, not for my benefit so I can get what I want? You've already gotten the greatest thing. What else do you want? How can I use my connections, my resources, my influence for their benefit? These are the kinds of questions that leaders ask when they have a radical encounter with God on a regular basis, and it tells them who they are in his kingdom. You no longer fight for all the stuff the world is fighting for. The resources of your world are no longer for your benefit. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about all of your other resources. They are for the benefit of the people who God has entrusted to your care. How you guys doing? All right. So this is a part of what happens when we have regular encounters with God, that these things no longer impress us, and then we can use them to actually lead well. We care for the people entrusted to our care. We use the resources of our world for their benefit. We never forget why people come to church, and we are here to actually serve them. All right, we are here to do something far greater than tasks. Tasks is just an excuse for the discipleship that we're called to. That is the name of the game. That if the church as an organization in all of its pieces no longer existed, discipleship would still be the name of the game. Which means that if you get discipleship right, you get it all right. If you get tasks right and don't get discipleship right, you can get it all wrong. All right? And so tasks are really important, but they take second seat to discipleship and care the way that God has called us to the people who he's entrusted us to, okay? So as leaders, that's what happens that's the kind of leader that God is making us, right? As leaders, we set the tone for the teams that we're on. This is your influence, right? We set the tone for the teams that we're on. Whatever you give is what's going to multiply. What I love about this is, and I've been to a lot of campuses and in a lot of churches, and I've seen leaders. And oftentimes, as I do any kind of help with leaders and teams, I find that leaders, they hit a roadblock. And the roadblock that they hit is that something is happening on their team, or they don't really like their team, or they have some complaints about their team. And I'm like, baby, you made that team. And oftentimes I find that you have set the tone for the team. You have built something that you actually don't like. The team actually looks like you. Okay. No, I'm sorry. Okay, all right. If so, not you, okay? Don't think about you for a minute because you don't do it. Think about another leader in this room, okay? Think about another leader in this room. Okay, think about another leader who's not in this room, okay? Who like I'm trying to do this gently. Like they complain. Like they complain about church. You get what I'm talking about? Like the church never does this, and we never do that, and they never have this. Especially if you're on another campus, you get like Central does this and Central does that, right? Do you guys get that? All right. That's where the team gets it from. We set the tone. If we lead with complaint, we're gonna have a complaining team. The team complains because we do. Because we do. If you guys ever meet Maddie is one of our residents. She works here at the Libertyville campus. She helped put all of this together. She has worked incredibly hard to make that happen. I'll introduce her at the end so you can see her if you don't know her. About 4 or 5 months ago, Maddie said, "Denville, you do so many things, and it's frustrating because she used to do my calendar and she used to intercept my phone calls and all that stuff." And she said, "I never hear you complaining about all of these things." And I'm like, because I don't want you to ever get bitter and complain about all of these things. Now, I complain to my wife when I get home. You know what I mean? Like, I told her, don't get it wrong. But I know that I set the tone for the teams that I'm on. Right? And so I do my best to know that God has given me influence, not so that I can carry it the way that I want to carry it, so that I could use it for the benefit of people. I want them to love the spiritual formation of the space that God has called them to. So I'm going to lead in such a way that I'm going to carry joy. Like Pastor Scott said, I have a place and people who I can tell those things to, not to the people who you're influencing. All right? Being faithful with your influence. So we lead with honor and we lead with honesty. Like, hey, I'm frustrated about this, but there's just joy in what we're doing, and the main things are the main things. I'm not saying to lie, not saying to hide it, but I'm saying to set the tone and to watch our influence because we're creating the kind of church. I want to lead the kind of church that I want to be a part of, right? And sometimes, like, we create a kind of church, and then we're like, I don't like this church. I'm like, well, you made it. Right, right. So there's a tone that we set in our leadership, and this is the part where we lead we lead over our people in some areas, and then we lead alongside our people in some areas. And this is the tricky part about leadership. You spend time with people to where you start to lead alongside them, not knowing that your influence over them is actually something greater. And it's just to be mindful of that. There are times when I walk with people and we'll sit down and laugh and joke, but when it goes into the areas of talking about people, like I just unsubscribe and I pull out. Right? Or when it goes into conversations that I'm like, I actually need to not come alongside you in this because I'm going to set the tone. I actually need to lead in a different kind of way. And so leaders set the tone for the teams that they're on, right? And then the yeah, this would be the last thing I walk us through. The way that we handle change on our team, then, right? Like some of you are like, well, on my team right now, people are coming to do tasks, and people are kind of bitter, and people are kind of mad, and people aren't kind of showing up, and this is not really happening. So we kind of picked apart a couple of things that are probably realities on teams, or maybe there's some things on your team right now that you realize that you probably don't really like very much and that you'd want to change, right? And the big question around leaders who are already leading, maybe you inherited a team, like you just started to lead a team that you took on, or maybe you built a team and over time the team that you're leading just they're not where you want them to be. The big question here is what changes do we want to see in our teams? And that's what I want you to think about for the next couple of minutes here. What changes do we want to see in our teams? If it's not about getting tasks done, if it's not about making you shine, if it's not about your preferences, what kind of changes do we want to see in our teams? And then I want to lead us into how we make changes in our team, right? What kind of changes do you want to see? So let me hear some of what you guys are thinking. What are some changes that you would say, here's some changes I would like to see in my team? Give me some things. Yes. Responsibility, right? Just being responsible and responsive. It's good. Yeah. What else? Yes. Clean up after themselves. My God, yes. Amen. Yes. Serving comes with sacrifice. My gosh, yes. 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 My God. Humility and desperation for God. Right? I mean, if you have people who are coming to serve and they're just kind of blasé, they never go into the service, they never worship, they do the task and sit in the lobby, hopefully you want to see something different on your team. Right? It's good. What else? What else do you guys have? Yes. Reducing complaints. Yes. Right? Maybe like gratitude, right? Like gratitude has a way of edging out complaint. Joy that comes with serving. It's good. Right? Like if where you sit right now, you start to have a dream for your team, right? What this means is that one of the things Pastor Scott said is leaders begin by acknowledging the reality that they're in, right? And this is what we're doing right now. What is the reality of your team, right? If you're going to say my team is awesome and nothing needs to change because they're doing amazing, you're probably not willing to accept the reality of your team, and thus you cannot lead them into the reality of the kingdom, right? So it begins with where are we and what do we want to see? Do you have a kingdom dream or a vision or imagination for your team? Because they have come to Jesus not to serve on your team, but to become more like Jesus. And so we must have a vision for the people who are serving alongside us to become more like Jesus. And a part of that is I just recognize these things about my team dynamics, or I recognize these things about people on my team, and I just really have this kingdom vision for the people who I'm serving. They do great tasks. It's wonderful. But that's not why they're here. Right? And so these are some changes that we would want to see. A rule of thumb, especially in the area of spiritual formation and lead-in, ministry teams in a church context. There are a couple ways that people normally go about change within their teams. One of them is emails. You send an email on what you want to see different. Yeah. Does it work? Does it work? I need everyone to show up on time. Send, right? There's something far deeper than behavior modification that I think we're going after, right? Here's a rule of thumb that I think is really important for you as a leader, as you're leading your team. Whatever it is that you want to see in your team must first see it in Jesus. You've got to lead your team to see it in Jesus. If you want to lead your team in any area, you don't lead your team with compliance or with power or with emails or with bullet points, right? It's maybe they just haven't seen it in Jesus enough to where they have a magnificent obsession with Jesus in this area, and there's something about seeing it in Christ and being conformed to his likeness. That you're not here to please me, you're here to become more like Jesus. And what if we just looked at Jesus in this kind of way more, right? I want to help them to see in Jesus. So that becomes the responsibility of the leader, right? It is a miracle. Some of the issues that would happen on teams, it's a miracle for them to change. It's going to take an act of God. I'm like, yeah, it will. It will. And the scriptures tell us that when we see him, we become like him. That there's something about beholding his glory and being transformed into his likeness. Asking for behavior modification instead of transformation is to have priority for the task of your team more than the spiritual formation of your team. Again, asking for behavior modification instead of transformation, that means that we're prioritizing the task of our teams more than the spiritual formation of our teams. Spiritual formation is transformation. Behavior modification is just get this thing done in a way that I like, right? And we're saying nobody came to get things done. People came because God is drawing them to himself, and transformation needs to happen. So we're not going to say, do these 10 things because I don't like it, or do these 10 things and be better. Spiritual formation comes through transformation. It is transformation that needs to happen, and transformation is a miracle. It happens as we behold Jesus. So one of the things that our teams must have is the ability to see Jesus through your leadership. On your tables, in the center of your tables there, this is something I created for some of our teams. It's the Gospel of Mark. And it's a way of reading through the Gospels together. If you don't have anything that you're doing with your team or inspiring your team or pointing towards Jesus, this is an easy on-ramp to do that. This is a journey that begins this coming week, and it walks all the way up to Easter. Right? And what that means is you can set something like this before your team. We'll send this out in an email, in a PDF also. But this is something that you can say, hey, guys, for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be reading the Bible together. And it's not a whole lot. It's really, really short. Something about serving teams I have found is that like you guys, some of you might lead a small group, but small groups are for people who like really want to dive into the Bible, right? Most people who are on teams, they're not there for a Bible study. Right? And so these are really, really short read-ins that we're going to get through a whole gospel together between now and Easter. And it's an opportunity for you to actually lean into spiritual formation instead of task management for teams. Because this is why they have come. So you can start to read the gospel together, and every time you get together with your team, this is an easy jump-off point. For how are you finding this reading? What stood out to you as we were reading together? If you get together with your entire team on a regular basis, this is a great opportunity for you to point towards Jesus. Anything that you want to see in your team, if you think it's going to come through behavior modification and more emails, I'm telling you, you're missing on the greatest part of why they have actually come. They have come to see Jesus. And our job is to continually show them Jesus in the most beautiful ways. Right? And then the last thing here, and then we'll have a time for some Q&A. And then the last thing here we'll see is there are some vehicles I think we have for leading our teams well. And making sure these are two arms that I've developed for our teams that I think have been really helpful in just asking the question, and how are we doing these things? The first one is connection. How are people connecting to each other? And then the second one is care, right? How are they connecting to God? I want you to be thinking about the people on your team, and you're asking, how are the people on my team connecting to God? Next time you have a one-on-one, ask them, hey, how do you best connect to God? Easy question. That's like during worship, we're doing this. Awesome. How are you connecting to God? Right? And how are they connecting to one another? If there are people who are coming on your team and they're getting tasks done, but they're not in community, man, tell your campus pastor I said they have a budget that you can have lunches and dinners. And like put together things for your team to get to. They're not there to do tasks. They're there for community. They're there for connection. They're there for what God is doing. And on our team is that possibility for experience. How are they connecting to each other? Is there an opportunity for you to be able to host a time where they get to not just serve together, but they get to like eat together. They get to enjoy some time together also, right? And then care. How are they being cared for by God? This means that you know the prayer requests that are on your team. You know how God is caring for them or what areas they're praying for the care of God, and you're joining them in that. Are there practical things that people on your teams need? I guarantee you that oftentimes, like your campus pastor will get messages from people who are serving on your team, and they have deep needs, and you just don't know about them because you haven't asked. And to be praying for them, and to maybe how can I use the resources of my world for your benefit, right? And then helping them to care for one another. This is the community portion of church that people have come for that they cannot lose because they have now come on our serving team. So I'll leave you with that. These are the questions I would just love for you to ask yourself, and I'm going to invite Reed and Kelsey to join me up here. These are the three big questions that I would just love to give you for our time. Three questions to ask yourself: who has the Spirit entrusted to my care? What do I want them to see in Jesus right now, and how can I create space for connection and care? If you take one of those questions in turn, just one. If you find the one that you're probably furthest from and say, I'm going to take one of these questions and I'm going to take some time and answer that and respond to that in a real way, taking some of what I have shared today, I think that the more that you spend time with God and allow Him to influence your leadership, you start to see that your team starts to look like Jesus. All right? Who are they? And what do I want to see them? What do I want them to see in Jesus right now? And how can I create space for connection and care? And as a leader, if you don't take anything else from anything I say today, if you show up tomorrow to your team who are doing all kinds of things, and you just say, how can I help? And if that becomes the rhythm of your leadership, you're caring for them, you're connecting to them, you're creating a dynamic on your team that's really important for us. All right? Reed, and Kelsey. So I've asked Reed and Kelsey to join me here. I would love to just have a time for some Q&A, questions about the talk, but also just questions about team dynamics that you guys have. These are people who lead I lead teams in an amazing way. And even if it's like chapel specific, they lead at the chapel, so it's not like abstract leadership stuff. But like, what are some big questions that you guys have that you would just love to spend some time on? Go for it.
Yeah, I think a couple things I've done. Obviously, for a long season, was in student ministry here, and now I'm in a campus pastor role. But I think reference my student pastor days, just because I had a lot of time where I had to manage lots of people in those spaces. I'd say, one, I looked for, do they have a lunch break during their workday that we could hang out, and could I make myself available during their workday to meet with them somewhere? If they were close enough and they wanted to come to church, great. If they weren't, how could I come and meet them on their turf and join them that way? Some other things that I have done is I'm typically a person who tries to block out my day, and I really see it in 3 chunks, and I try to give one of those chunks to my family. And so there have been times, like even when I was in student ministry, I knew Wednesday nights I was going to be at church, and so my morning I actually took off to be with my family so I could be available at night. And so same way, if I had a Thursday night meeting, or even yesterday I failed at this. I didn't give my morning away to my family, but I ended up being there at 6 o'clock because somebody needed to meet after work. Typically, I try to make adjustments for me on the front end to say, hey, can I make sure that my family's not inconvenienced as I try to care for people when they're available? And so I've made a couple of those adjustments there. And then sometimes I've had to look at it and say, with the size of my team, do I need to adjust how I'm meeting with people? And so there was a season where it made sense for me to do one-on-one coffees, but then a team got so robust that was 21 hours that I was investing into individuals in that spot, and I had to say, okay, I don't have 21 hours to give right now. I could probably do a third of this. And so then I said, how can I bring smaller groups of people together to do? And you might have been one of those for a season where I was having people over for breakfast at my house. This was pre-kids, so it was really easy for me to make that happen. But it wasn't as chaotic as my home is now. But I just invited people into my space, and I still had similar conversations, but it allowed me to be in a spot where I could still serve the team that I was on, but not have my investment of time prevent me from doing so.
Yeah, I think that's good what Reed said. I would add to that, I think we allow the Holy Spirit to guide us to the people we are supposed to intentionally invest in seasons. We cannot care as deeply for everyone on our teams as we might want to. So I feel like there's levels of like targets, right? So people that might be in the core of like, these are the people I need to be walking closely beside in this season. How do I make that happen? And then others that a Sunday morning check-in is going to do the job, or is going to make them feel cared for. Or like Denville said, the how can I help? Helping at our campus, we do huddles like on a quarterly basis. How can I walk alongside of them as they're doing their huddle? So it's allowing the Holy Spirit to almost guide who you are targeting the most. So I have 4 women that I'm walking alongside of. A couple of those can meet during the day. A couple it has to be outside of work hours. And so I just make it work. I meet on a Saturday, I meet after church on a Sunday, or I meet on an evening. And I work it around my family schedule. I give them an hour or whatever it might be. But because they are the ones the Holy Spirit's really laid specifically on my heart, I make that a priority in my timeline, yeah. So I actually was at a corporate retreat recently, and they said something really good. They said people want you to ask favors of them. And I'm wrapping this back around to your question. It kind of was an aha moment for me. You know, I think sometimes we feel like we're putting something extra on people. They don't want to do this. Why am I making them do more than they want to do? And they were kind of reframing it for me and saying people actually want you to invite them into something. So to your point, what I would do in this situation is, although you're extending it to the entire team and asking them to show up, maybe via email, maybe via group setting, you're saying, hey, I want everyone to come. I would start just targeting 2 or 3 people specifically, that maybe, again, praying about asking the Holy Spirit who is ready for something like this, who will commit to something like this, and then making it a very specific ask, reaching out to them saying, I see something special on you. I want you to help prepare our environment before the service. I did this at our last church with our women's ministry team. I knew that there needed to be some pre-prep in the auditorium, like we needed to be breaking down spiritual walls before people even got in there. So I opened up the opportunity. I think if we'd stayed longer, I would have done even more with it. But helping to extend that vision to a couple of people and saying, I see this in you. Will you help me in this? Because it's where 2 or more are gathered, and I need a team in this. So that kind of specific invitation to a couple of people on the team.
I would just say really briefly in that, like, it's really important to obviously speak to the why in that, like to major on that and to really bring somebody into the vision of like, how does this help our team be Jesus in this moment, and to invite them into that space, I think is something that you can't miss. And if it's just show up at 8:45 because I said so, okay, but what am I going to get in that? And I think then when they do show up, like, is that experience meaningful enough that the vision that you just said, the why that you just gave, do I actually experience that why in the moment? Does it feel purposeful and intentional? Has this been thought through and been something you've prepared for so that they feel like they're coming into something that is going to be really helpful for them as they orient themselves in leading? Yeah, I don't think there's probably a team in our church that even if they were fully staffed would turn somebody away. And so even if you're strictly doing this for a discipleship journey and it's being really beneficial for them to just experience a more committed development, or just being in proximity with people that are like-minded, I'd say one thing that we employed recently here at Grays Lake, that I stole from a guy named Nick Blevins, who wrote a book called The Volunteer Playbook. They do a thing called the Volunteer Recruitment Framework, and in that, you start with a list of people that you want to invite into serving, and you literally send them 2 emails, and they're probably not going to respond to either of them because nobody reads their email these days, and then the last step in it is a text. And for me, I started doing this at Grays Lake. We have 597 families that are nominally involved, which means they give in some way, or they maybe attend a group, or their child attends something at our church, or they're significantly involved. So they're in some way communicating, hey, chapel's my church home in some way, but they aren't serving. And so that's 597 families at Grays Lake that fit in that criteria. And so I have, since November, taken 30 people a month that I have reached out to in those ways, and I have literally just said, hey, you're somebody that I want to reach out to, just invite. I'm trying to help people right now get connected to serving. Would you be open to a conversation? And I will tell you in that my goals have not been I'm going to have 90% of that list say yes to a conversation. It's actually been I'm going to aim for 10%. But in that, just doing that on our end, and that's been me literally saying it could be weekend hosting, it could be facilities, it could be the care center, it could be production, it could be kids, it could be students, it could be the cafe. I'm not defining the role yet. I'm just saying, are you open to talking about serving right now? And I'll, in that, be able to say, what are the skill sets? What's the things that are on your heart that you'd want to do, that you get a lot of life in, that would just fill you up? And I'm letting that then be my introduction to their next step in that process.
What if, and I'm hearing Charles here, if there's not like a space where they can serve, like there's no, like we don't have, like this team's full, this team, like we only need 5 of these people. And we got 5 of those people. Like, where are you going to put those 590? That's a lot of people. Where are you going to put them?
What I'm going to do
if
is
they all said yes, what are you going to do with them?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the people who've been in those roles for a long time, who haven't felt freedom to step into anything else because there's not been enough people to begin with in the first place, and I'm going to invite them into more. I'm saying, hey, you've been serving on this team for a long time, and you've been an incredible greeter here, but I also see this in you, and I think you could be an incredible discipler in a men's or a women's group, where we've got kids ministry volunteers that we just need more people to pour into them that way. Yeah. I'm usually going to invite my current team who's filled those spots, and I'm going to say, hey, would you consider something different on the team, or would you come into a role where you would coach and develop some of these people and build this more robust than what it could be? I think when you start unlocking those things, you now get to dream a little bit of new ways to be able to actually equip that team to do ministry and to be Jesus, in our church in ways that you can't when you're at a spot where you're like, I only have 2 right now. Okay.
Yeah.
What does that ministry look like, or how is that team ran differently when 5 are on the team instead of 2? And how do you leverage that team to do things differently? You also give time back to people, because if it's a setup and teardown team, then if you go from 2 to 5, you've just cut the process in half, and you can actually now better that experience.
Yeah, but then
everybody.
they're not getting as much time together. No, so there's a. But if something I learned from the small group time is that if you like on our campus, like we create teams, right? We create teams because like I run with the philosophy of it's an excuse to get people to connect and care for them, right? It is an excuse. So we have teams that I know full well that we don't need, right? And I think they know it too, right? But it's okay. That's not why we have them. We have them because it gives you a seat at the table, and we want to eat with you, right? And so the rule in small group is if you have a group of 10 people, give everybody something to do. Hey, you bring bread, and you bring butter. You're the butter girl, and you're the bread girl. And so now you have buy-in, and you have a reason to come to what we're doing. And hey, can you come and pray a little bit beforehand? Can you be the person who we share some of these prayer requests with as we get them? Would you come in like once a month, and would you do this? So there's just space where I think these are just reasons to get people into community, to get them a part of what we're doing. And even if there's small tasks that's needed here and there, evaluate what you're doing. Like, I'm sure there's stuff that you're doing where, like, you just need to trust somebody else with that. And that could be a great opportunity also. Can I take one more, and then we'll break for lunch? Yes. I have found that there are 3 things that I typically think through as I encounter people. And they're people who I regularly, like, I pray for, like, God, would you show me people? Right. When you're at a campus, there's tons of people to look at, and it's really hard to see any of them. And I just think there's an opportunity to see people. And sometimes we keep looking at the same people over and over again, and we're overlooking people. There are people who are unsuspecting, and they're waiting to be asked. I think if we can equip our team, your team is the best recruiter. They are the best recruiter for your team, because your team, especially if they're enjoying serving on your team, right? If there's life on your team, if they're enjoying connection and care and all this, you say, hey, do you have some folks who you see regularly on a Sunday who you would love to serve with? and they're going to be the best people to invite into this. So equip your teams to do that, because it's just one person. It's like if evangelism, you enjoy something, you share it with someone. And I think for the personal conversations that you're having with people as well, we have the tendency, if you've been at church for more than a year, you say hi to the same people every Sunday over and over again. It's the same people, the same conversation. How's the wife? How's the kids? How's that foot? And it's the same people in the same lobby every single Sunday. And then we're like, why am I not meeting new people? Because you're not meeting new people, right? There's an opportunity for people who've been coming to your campus for a really long time. And we have we have a smaller campus. There's people who come every single Sunday, and I have not met them. Like 150 people. It's not a lot. It's not 500 something families, right? And I'm like, and there's people who, because every Sunday the same people want to talk to me, right? And so it's our job to make sure that we are seeing people beyond what there is to look at. And have those conversations, and it's not a one-time ask. Whether it's invitation or correction, I think there are three principles I always give to people who I'm inviting or I'm leading: time, vision, and grace. There's some people who they just need time. I just need to be in fellowship with them and give them time, because now is not their time. There's some people who they have time, but they just don't have vision. And I need to actually sit down and cast a vision beyond the task of what we're doing, right? And then grace. There's just space for somebody said no, and they have time, and they won't get out of the pews. And this is where it is grace that actually changes people, and not instruction. And so sometimes when people have space and they have time and they say no, like, I need to extend a level of grace, because grace does way more work than manipulation and invitation and all of that. So time, vision, and grace are the three ingredients that I always try to use with people. And I ask the Lord, do they need more time? Do I need to cast more vision? Or do I just need to give them grace? And I just continue in those kinds of relationships, and I try to care for the people who God has entrusted to me already, because if I do well with them, they will be my best recruiters for teams. So, all right.
The only thing I would add is you have to ask more people than you think you do. As somebody who's churning that out right now at our campus, you have to ask way more people than you think you do, and you can't give up when 8 say no, because you're probably going to have 8 say no when 2 say yes. Like, that's even when you're. Yeah, and I would just say, like, you just have to be committed to continuing to ask and continuing to throw those opportunities out there, because the reality is we live in probably the busiest world we have ever existed in. People have plenty of things that are filling their time, and so serving and asking them into that is very hard in this season. But I think when you begin to do what Denville said, and you give people good vision for what they're going to experience in that, some really cool things get unlocked, and they see how they can look more like Jesus in the process. So.